This morning is the third installment of the current series, The Different Gardens of Life. You may remember that the first garden that we discussed was the Garden of Temptation, where humanity's first parents failed the test when Satan came and they surrendered to the serpent's hiss and rebelled against the goodness of God. The second garden we looked at was the one in the wilderness, where once again the serpent, this time though, tries to get Jesus to follow suit with what Adam failed to do, but Satan failed and Jesus prevailed. Today we're going to consider the third garden of the four, and it is the garden of pressure. The garden of pressure. All of us face pressure from one kind or another, in one season of life or another. And when those pressures come, sometimes they're just absolutely enormous, or at least we think that they are. And it can be pressures such as suffering or illness. It can be financial issues. It can be family issues. And the list can go on and on and on. Even though your experience of pressure can be nothing comparable to what the Lord Jesus experienced in Gethsemane, nevertheless we can learn a few lessons from Jesus' response to and activity toward this particular pressure that he faced in his own life. We can find, I think, several lessons to help us in our everyday life. Dr. Joseph Buckley, a scientist who's been working for 11 years studying stress on rats, has discovered that when he exposed thousands of different rats to the kind of pressures that people today face, the result was somewhat fascinating. He actually constructed a test chamber that would be flashing lights from time to time. There would be noises from beeps to the sound of aircraft. And he discovered that as he tested these rats with this chamber, that they developed a blood pressure issue, a permanent high blood pressure. He also discovered that they became irritable and sometimes even dangerous. One of the unforeseen aspects of this testing was what happened to Dr. Buckley and his graduate assistants. He discovered that not only did the rats' blood pressure rise, so did theirs. Not only did the rats become irritable, so did they. And he was pondering the significance of that particular thing. Nevertheless, Jesus, on the night before he faced the cross, after the Last Supper, the Passover meal with his disciples, he departs to a place that must have been somewhat usual space that he went to. Sometimes it's called a garden. Actually, it was a grove. It was olive trees called Gethsemane. Now, the trees are not why you have the name Gethsemane. Gethsemane means olive press. When olives were picked and they were crushed, there were three different squeezings to get every drop of oil out of the olives. You may find that in this particular garden, there must have been an olive press present. That's why it was called Gethsemane, which simply means olive press. But you'll discover that our Lord Jesus prayed 3 times, basically offering the same prayer in the garden as he prepared to face the cross. We discover in Mark's Gospel the account preserved for us in chapter 14. If you have your Bibles handy and would like to follow along, let me direct your attention there. Even though you've just sat down, let me invite you to stand again as we read the Word together. And if you don't have a Bible handy, just listen as I read. Begin in verse 32. And they went to a place called Gethsemane. And he said to his disciples, "Sit here while I pray." And he took with him Peter and James and John and began to be greatly distressed and troubled. A more literal rendering of that is that he became greatly distressed and horrified. And he said to them, "My soul is very sorrowful, even to death. Remain here and watch," or stay awake, stay alert. And going a little further, he fell on the ground and prayed that, if it were possible, that this hour might pass from him. And he said, "Abba, Father, all things are possible for you. Remove this cup from me, yet not what I will, but what you will." And he came and he found them sleeping. And he said to Peter, "Simon, are you asleep? Could you not watch 1 hour? Watch and pray that you may not enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." And again he went away and prayed, saying the same words. And again he came and found them sleeping, for their eyes were very heavy. And they did not know what to answer him. And he came a third time, and he said to them, "Are you still sleeping and taking your rest? It's enough. The hour has come. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand." You may be seated. We could literally spend hours unpacking what is taking place in just these few verses in Mark's Gospel that I just read. I'd like for us, however, to focus in on that which we can learn from how Jesus responded to the pressure that he was under in this Gethsemane. There are several things that we can learn. But one of the first thing is, when pressures come, pray. When pressures come, pray. The very first verse that I read, and that he went into a place called Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, "Sit here while I pray." I would imagine if I asked you, you would be very similar in response to me. When something happens, a pressure event, maybe it is a health crisis, maybe it's a financial issue, maybe it's a family crisis that's taking place, prayer may not be the first thing that we do. If it's a financial crisis, we may go and see what Dave Ramsey has to say about it. If it's a family crisis, we may look up James Dobson and see what he would give us and what kind of advice he would offer us. And those sources may be very valid and very helpful. I'm not dissing them in any way, but Jesus' first response is prayer. He's going to go before his Father and he's going to pray. And we discover that he prays basically the same thing 3 ways, 3 times. And in those prayers, he's making a request. It's one that's kind of puzzling to me, first and foremost, is that Jesus is asking if it be possible, let this hour, let this cup pass from me. Now, we've already looked at that in the past. The cup, of course, is a reference to God's wrath. We find that described in several Old Testament passages, but Jeremiah really puts a fine point on it. Where Jeremiah is told by God to take the cup of wrath and offer it to the nations, beginning at Jerusalem, and telling the people that they must drink from it. Even at the Passover meal, there's that final cup that nobody touches, Elijah's cup, which came to represent, at least in the teaching of some of the rabbis, this is symbolic of God's wrath. And Jesus is using that figure, that metaphor, to refer to this. In Isaiah chapter 51, in the heart of the passages dealing with the suffering servant that Isaiah writes about, we find that there is an occasion where the cup of wrath is withdrawn. Perhaps that's what Jesus is thinking about. That maybe there's a way that God can withdraw this cup of wrath, but then he surrenders completely to the will of God. But not my will. At that moment, Jesus' desire was to have that cup withdrawn, but not my will, but what your will is what he surrendered to. Stonewall Jackson, we discover, according to E.M. Bounds in his book, Purpose of Prayer, speaks about General Jackson in very graphic terms. What I mean by that, he talks about the kind of man that General Stonewall Jackson truly was. He was a man that was given to and dedicated to prayer. Listen to what E.M. Bounds writes as he, and by the way, if I can kind of make a plug here so you understand why E.M. Bounds is important for this illustration, is that he was a chaplain in the Confederate Army during the Civil War. So he had first-hand access to these men. Stonewall Jackson said this, and I quote, "I have so fixed a habit of prayer on my mind that I never raise a glass of water to my lips without asking for God's blessing. Never seal a letter without putting a word of prayer under the seal. Never take a letter from the post without a brief sending of my thoughts heavenward. Never change my classes in the lecture room without a minute's petition for the cadets who go out and for those who come in." That's an amazing attitude and practice. And Jesus is very much like that, and even more so. Here he comes petitioning his Father just before the most horrific event in human history is to take place. Now, I don't know about you, what your attitude about prayer is. I'm not going to put you on the spot and ask you to raise your hands or anyway respond back to me in this, but is your prayer life what you think it ought to be? Are you satisfied with how your prayer life goes? Most of us would say that probably one of the most frustrating aspects of our walk with Christ is our consistent praying. It may be that when we pray, your mind wanders. You begin thinking about things that you wonder where in the world they come from. You may find it difficult to know what to pray about or what to pray for. You may even find benefit in using different kinds of methods like ACTS. You can think about each one of those acronyms, each one of those letters represents an aspect of prayer, and so you can kind of cover everything. You may want to use the Lord's Prayer as a model prayer and use that as kind of an outline about how you pray. There's a lot of stuff out there. You can buy book after book after book written by Christians who talk about and try to teach people how to pray. But folks, the bottom line is you've got to do it. You can read all the books you can lay your hands on. You can go to every conference that's available. You can watch and listen to every podcast. But unless you and I actually pray, we'll always be frustrated with our prayer lives. Jesus prayed almost, it seemed, all the time. Before every major event, we find that he prays all night. On many occasions, he rises early while the Scripture tells us it's yet dark, and he prays. Here he's facing the cross. And it's not just the cross, so that is enough. The agony of his soul is the realization that he's going to drink the full cup of God's wrath. And in that horrifying realization, that hour, he begins petitioning the Father, if, but nevertheless what you will be done. The bottom line in prayer is not to be concerned that you can pray eloquently. Not that your prayers may seem beautiful to hear to the ears of others who may be listening. Not that you can pen very poetic prayers, but the main thing is just to borrow an old model of the Nike Shoe Company, just do it. Folks, that's what we have to do. Just do it. Whether you're good at it or think you're good at it or not is irrelevant. Do it. So often we give up prior to doing that. I heard one preacher a number of years ago make this claim. Satan isn't worried about our studies. He's not concerned about our music. He's not overly anxious about our sermons. But he's horrified when we pray. And we usually put everything else in front of that. Not Jesus. Not Jesus. When the pressure came, when the Gethsemane happened, he falls on his face and he prays. Secondly, I want to share with you something else. When pressures come, remember others. When pressures come, remember others. Verses 37 and 38. And he came and he found them sleeping and said to Peter, Simon, are you asleep? Could you not watch 1 hour? Watch and pray. He's telling Peter, be awake, stay awake. He's asking his disciples to remain vigilant, stay alert and awake. Interestingly, he picks Peter out by name. Why? Because in the conclusion of chapter 13, that's actually in chapter 14, you find that after the Lord's Supper, Peter is the one maintaining, these others made the part for me, I'm not going to. Swearing his undying loyalty. So Jesus says, Simon. Calls him by his Aramaic name, his Hebrew name, Simon, not Peter, Simon. Are you asleep? But I want you to notice what comes next. Watch and pray, and here it is. That you may not enter into temptation. That you may not enter into temptation. I want you to, don't miss this. It's easy to miss if you're not paying close attention. Jesus is facing the greatest crisis of his earthly ministry. He's getting ready to face the conclusion of his mission upon this planet. He is under enormous stress and strain as he's facing what's going to take place. Not only the horrific physical suffering, he's going to experience the full wrath of God being poured upon him. And when that's getting ready to take place, he's thinking about others. I want you to catch that. I want you to catch that. Watch and pray, not for me. Pray that you may not enter into temptation. It's the natural inclination, it seems, that when we face major challenges, pressures, with whatever it is that keeps you awake at night, whatever it is that when you think of it, there's that pit there in your stomach. What our natural inclination is our world shrinks down to nothing but us. It's me. It just continues to get smaller and smaller until there's nothing is in my view but me. And that's what normally happens. That's what often happens. But notice that Jesus is not taking his eyes off the needs of others. He's not telling him, Peter, Simon, pray for me. No, Peter. Pray that you will not fall into temptation. That is something, when hardships come, when suffering comes, when illness comes, when financial pressures come, when family issues happen, when marriages get strained, that's almost like blood in the water for Satan. It's almost like a summons. Here he comes. And he will use that at every bit of his advantage, trying to lead people into a sinful response. A response that would distance them from God instead of bringing them closer to him. That's what he does. So in the midst of that, Jesus is still thinking about Peter. The one who swore allegiance, the one that Jesus knows is going to deny him, that one, he's still concerned about him. What can we learn at this juncture from Jesus? Listen, folks. We have a tendency, because of our fallen nature, which is expressed primarily in our self-centeredness, to think about the world only through the benefit to me. Only for me. That's why you get upset when somebody cuts in line in front of you. That's why you're aggravated that a parking place that you have your eye on, somebody zings into it before you get there. That's why you get very upset if someone doesn't say something kind to you when you expected it. Or you get your feelings hurt. Because we live our lives because it's all about me. And it's not. It's not about you. It's not about me. It's all, if you're a Christian, it's all about Him. And He shows us right here. Don't let your world sneak in. Don't let it just be you and your little bitty world. Don't do that. Don't do that. Jesus doesn't. It's the third lesson I want to share with you. And that is when pressures come, face them with resolve. Again, this is something that's kind of easy to miss. In verse 41, then he came a third time and he said to them, "Are you still sleeping and resting? Enough. The time's come. Look, the Son of Man is being betrayed into the hands of sinners." I want to take you back to verse 34. And he said to them, he said to Peter, James, and John, "My soul is very sorrowful, even to death. Remain here. Stay awake." He's telling them the agony and the anguish that he was experiencing. And he was, just stay close. Just be here. But now, you notice the change? You notice the tone difference? Do you notice that it's no longer like that? What do we find now? We find that he says it's enough. The time's come. Look, the Son of Man is being betrayed into the hands of sinners. During the agony of that time of prayer, pleading with God, if it be possible, remove that cup and remove him from the hour which he's getting ready to face. In the midst of that, even though he's surrendering to God's will, of course, but in the midst of that, he comes on the other end with a resolve. Things have changed. The agony of prayer in Gethsemane now has issued itself in a victory. It's different now. He's going to carry out God's plan now. He's resolved that he's going to face the cross. He's going to face the full wrath of God that's coming, and he's resolved to do it. You see, one of the things about prayer, it's not simply that we're trying to get God to give us stuff. It's okay to pray for that. It's okay. But it's more than that. There's something that when you and I develop a prayer life that is a genuine, strong prayer life relying upon the goodness of God, there is something else that will take place. And that is when you face the crises of life, and you're going to face them, folks. You don't escape them in this. Just because you're a Christian, you don't escape these things. You're going to face them. The thing that is, when you pray, and when you're honest with God, He knows what's going on anyway. And you just pour out your heart to Him. He comes. And He may not give you what you're asking, but He will stand with you. He will strengthen you. There's a deep sense of resolve that will come that, okay, I can face this now. Maybe a while ago I couldn't, but I can face it now because you are with me. The Apostle Paul talks about that. Everybody abandons him. He's going to stand before, this is part of the second time he's going to go before Nero. Everybody abandons him. But he says, even though that's happened, Christ stood with me. He felt that intensity of God's presence. And that comes through prayer. It doesn't come through, a good Bible study. Now, I'm not dissing Bible study. That's good stuff. We need Him. We need Him. In the early days of our republic, it is mentioned that a stranger went to view Congress, and he asked his companion with him, "How could I recognize George Washington in the midst of all these men?" His companion's response was, "When Congress goes to prayer, Washington is the man on his knees." So listen, I don't know how people face life without Christ. I don't know how they handle the anguish of life. But with Christ, His presence, His power, His promise that He would never leave us nor forsake us, He would be with us always, even to the end of the world, those promises. But to really to apprehend and to experience those, we need to follow what we find Jesus doing here. Remember, the prayer was His first reaction, not His last response. We also notice that Jesus' world did not just shrink in to Him and Him alone and what He was facing. He was concerned about other people. And of course, there is a resolve to face it because it is not only God's will, but God has given the strength in Him to do so. I don't know what's going on in your life. A lot of people are very good at keeping things hidden. You ask them, "How are you doing?" They say, "Fine." So that's what we expect them to say. It may not be fine. You may be here this morning and realizing that life isn't that fine. You're really hurting. You may be frightened. You may be scared. You may have apprehension, maybe anxiety about, whatever's coming tomorrow. Jesus is a great example, as He is in every area of life. But for our purposes, this morning specifically here, seek God. Seek God as Jesus did. Seek Him as you and I need to. Would you bow with me this morning? Father, we've heard it all before. We've resolved